couple of notes regarding Upstart. Well, in terms of the course, I will remind you next week's lecture is the last lecture. It will be about how to give a good pitch. Mike Polonsky from Equicom. We then have a gap while the Upstart people frantically prepare their presentations, and then the 29th of April, the presentation. The way that works, the presentations take place in the afternoon. You are welcome to attend the presentations, but you will have to sign a non-disclosure agreement to protect the presenters. If you want to skip that, there's a party afterwards, and it is the year-end party for the class up in the cafeteria there, to which I, sincerely hope you can all come. That's when we'll hand out the certificates, and we will celebrate the winners. And I know they're all sitting in the audience here thinking that they're going to be the winner of the Upstart Prize, and you'll have a chance to be part of that. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to ask a colleague of mine, Don Duval, who's Mars's Vice President of Business Services, to come and introduce tonight's speaker.
Thank you, Tony. Well, it gives me, it's a great privilege tonight to introduce Harvey Coleman. For those of you who don't know him, I'll just give you a bit of a background. Although you wouldn't know it, Harvey has over 40 years of experience in the realm of IT. He headed the pre-sales support for banking systems and was responsible for marketing strategy for the Olivetti Group in the 1980s. He spent 10 years as managing director of the Acorn Group. He's a past president of the Olivetti Group Canada, the past president of Dell Canada, and the EVP of GIAC, a Canadian-based global software company where he was responsible for companies in North America, Europe, and the Far East. In the last 10 years, though, he has focused on working with very early-stage startup companies across all facets of the ICT sector, be it wireless, software, hardware, web-based businesses. From an academic perspective, he has a degree of physics from Oxford University. From a family perspective, he is married with 3 children. And my great pleasure, Harvey is one of our all-star Mars advisors, a great asset for Mars and a great asset for our community to work with early-stage technology companies. So, without any further ado, I would like to welcome Harvey Coleman. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. First thing I should say is it's a great shame that all those seats weren't really being set up for me. It's for tomorrow, but still, not to worry about that. I'm going to try and spend a few quick minutes with you this evening on a subject that is dear to your hearts and dear to my hearts. And it's a subject which all of you from your course already know a great deal about, and I'm hoping you're going to say yes to a number of the things that I'm going to say. But the challenge with saying yes is that you may just be saying yes by paying lip service to those things. And one of the things that I've found over the years with the various companies with which I've worked is people know that many of the things that I'm saying this evening are right, but they don't actually do them. And so I would really say to you, please, in thinking about them, really think about not just, hey, those are good ideas, and yes, we as a business ought to do it, but really get to the point of actually thinking about how you really should be doing it. The first thing that I want to highlight is the words that I've used in terms of describing what I'm going to talk about. I haven't said creating a successful business. I'm talking about creating and developing a successful business. Because most people, when they are in the business of getting started, are desperate to create their business, desperate to create their product, and don't think about what goes beyond that. What is it that's going to take that product and really make it successful in the marketplace by thinking ahead about the things that they have to develop. Now, of course, everybody says that's great. To have a lot of customers is is the sort of challenge that we actually want. And of course, it is a challenge that you actually want, but it would be much nicer, and we'll find this out from some of the experiences that I've had, it would be much, much nicer to actually be thinking about those challenges during the creation phase and actually building them into one's company and one's product. Now, Why do I feel I can talk a little bit about this subject? Well, these are not the only companies that I've worked as startups with, and I can tell you that the one on the top left-hand corner was started in 1969, so it's 40 years ago. So startups were going in the IT industry quite a while ago. But because there are so many, I've had the great benefit of making lots of mistakes. And that's one of the things that I would advise everybody to do. Make lots of mistakes. It's a risk business that you're in, and risk is what it's all about. So make the mistakes, because from making the mistakes, you will learn. And I want to say just another couple of things about these startups before I leave this slide. As I said, the first one was about 40 years ago. But interestingly enough, just a tiny thing about why that particular company actually failed. It made one of the great mistakes. It upset its investors. Easy thing to do, actually, and something that we might touch upon a little later on. But it upset its investors. And the second thing that I found out afterwards, and I was on the technical side of the company, so I can safely say this today, is it really didn't get its marketing plan right. So by having those two mistakes, that particular company failed. And in that list of companies that you see behind you, some of which are going today, which are alive and going well today, interestingly enough, about half of them, the startups, there's one which isn't a startup, or wasn't a startup when I was involved with it, did actually execute their exit strategy. And that's quite good, to actually have had a chance to be involved with as many companies that actually got to the point of achieving the exit that they wanted. The company range is very wide. You've got companies here in the software industry, companies in broadband communications, companies in the health sector, companies that are in online training. There's an online gambling company in there. I think an important lesson to learn about that is essentially the rules, or what we learn about startups, don't change too much from organization to organization, or type of industry, certainly in the IT field, to type of industry. They're very similar. And the range of companies has meant that I've had a chance to see those similarities. And in fact, as I mentioned, one of the companies wasn't a startup that I have there is Dell Canada. Dell Canada is interesting because at the time that I had the benefit of working for it, we were growing at the rate of 6% per month. When a company is growing at the rate of 6% per month, think about it, that means every 6 months you double in size. You get a whole series of very different challenges. Challenges where you really have to think on your feet, and the thinking on your feet and the changes that Dell was able to execute at that point in time really were part of the reason why I think it was so successful. But there are some other reasons, and we might actually find as we go along, we're going to touch upon those as well. By the way, it wasn't the fastest growth company that I had the benefit of being involved with. There is one company up there that was growing at the rate of 15% per month. And 15% per month creates a set of challenges which you really have to think about. And again, we might get a chance to touch upon some of those later. So let's talk about some of the lessons that I've had the benefit, I think, of learning over the years. And I'm going to start by talking about that creation aspect of the company. And I'm going to break it down into 3 areas: products, people, and cash, which are the 3 areas that most people concern themselves with. So let's go over some of the issues that relate to product. Most of these, as I said, are things you'll say straight away, well, we knew it anyway, but I'm going to repeat them. The most critical thing I put at the top, which is really be hard on yourselves. And always, in every single aspect of what you do and what you design, say, so what? If you can't answer that question, then frankly, you've got a bit of a challenge before you've even started. Ideally, the product, clearly everybody says, let's have a product which is disruptive with intellectual property. And I may tell you that one of the companies that I was involved with, the only thing that it did was create IP. It actually was set up to do nothing else but create IP and sell it. And that's an interesting, again, it presents some interesting challenges because the question you're always asking yourself is, who are those people that you're going to actually sell the IP to? And you need to have a thought about that in advance, because even though you are inventing something, and in this particular case, the people were inventing a new way of throwing ink on paper. And so obviously creating some of the printers that you see around, and they worked with some of the major companies in the world. You have to, if you know who your customers are, it's going to affect the way you think about actual invention, which is really quite interesting. The second element of this being harder on yourself is the Whitlam factor, and everybody knows about what's in it for me, but you've got to have the answer of the what's in it for me from the other side. If you can't answer Whitlam from the other side, you haven't got a real differentiator, you haven't got a product. Now, of course, you can have a product which will fit into a particular niche in the marketplace, and that's another way of creating your what's in it for me, because you can actually satisfy their particular requirements. So if you're going to want to create a business which isn't going to be disruptive, then it better fit into a specifically large and growing niche if you want to create and develop a successful company. The next thing which I think is extremely important in this area, and that I have learned by my mistakes, I have to tell you, over the years, is produce version 1. The number of companies that I've had the benefit of working with who never actually got to the point of producing version 1 is quite amazing. And what I mean by that is you get very close to the end of the product and somebody tells you that there are several features that you really desperately need. And so you go on and you continue to develop those features, and you continue to develop those features, and you don't get to the most critical point in the marketplace, which is get out there in the market and see what they really require before you have actually have continued to develop those particular features that you think are great, and unfortunately the market didn't desire in the end. The second element of it is what I've called watch out for the large customer syndrome. You're desperate to get started, and you meet a large customer who tells you that they're probably the most important customer in your marketplace. They have possibly the largest share in the marketplace, and really your product doesn't quite meet their requirements, so you need to add these features into your product. The answers are probably they're not telling you the truth, even though they believe it themselves. And I can think of a very, very large organization in the Far East which told a company that I was working with exactly that. And we actually had to tell them that we were not going to produce the individual features that were required from them. And I'll come on to another aspect of how that may not always be the right answer, but in that particular case, it was the right answer. And the reason is very simple. The most advanced company in a market sector has often developed in a way which is unique to itself. Great if you just want to sell the product to the one company, but no good if you want to sell to the breadth of the marketplace. And in fact, they may even be just too sophisticated for the rest of your marketplace. So it's really, really important not to get carried away by that large customer who you think is going to make you a great success in the marketplace if they are effectively unique and a market to themselves. The second thing when we talk about products is, and I said let's get our product to version 1, is watch out for the permanent beta. Now there is one company who's rather large and has an extremely high share valuation, who is well known for always having the permanent beta. And so they definitely prove that my argument is wrong. But for most of us, get a product which is solid. Even that version 1, in fact it's better to have version 1 solid than to actually go on and continuously have new features, and you're constantly in beta mode. So another important aspect. The next one is have a roadmap. Not because you are going to, as I said before, constantly be developing the product, but because if you're dealing with large customers, they want to know where you're going. Large customers are really quite interesting organizations to deal with, and I've had the benefit of working with some reasonably large customers in the IT fields, people prepared to make investments of $200–300 million on one system, so quite large customers. Large customers want to know that the product that you've got, and in fact, is going somewhere. Dare I say it, lots of individual people in the marketplace, small customers, don't necessarily make that requirement. They just want the product that you're supplying to work well. But if you're dealing with a large customer, they want to know that what you are doing is going to have a future. It may be further versions of the product, but it also may be just the fact that they want to see this particular product developed in a future direction or a set of future directions. So they want to make sure that you're way ahead in thinking in terms of where the product should be. So they're going to want to see a roadmap. Let me tell you another interesting aspect about large customers, and a little piece of experience that we had when I was with Dell. Nothing that I was actually responsible for, but I think something that's interesting when it comes to developing product. Large customers are quite interesting because I've just told you they want to know where you're going, but they also don't want to see a lot of change. And that's another interesting aspect. If you deal with a small customer, when we were dealing with personal customers in the marketplace with Dell, our product could be changing, I guess, every 2 weeks. You may not see it, but something inside that product was changing. Maybe the disk supply was changing. Maybe one of the particular components that we were using, or major components we were using, was changing every 2 weeks. Didn't matter. If you're a large organization, you buy 10,000 of them, and they're being delivered to you over maybe a 6 or 9 month period of time, and every 2 weeks you change the product. And now inside that organization, nobody quite knows what's in every single one of those boxes. That becomes a major servicing and maintenance problem. And so large organizations don't like that. So when you're thinking of your marketplace, important to think of the nature of your marketplace, where they fit into the market, what their requirements may be, and therefore how your product should be developed to meet their requirements. I could almost have put really understand your markets at the very top before you even produce your product, because of course that's really where it should be. And I'm going to touch on the bit in brackets in a moment. But I'm with Mars, and one of the things that I was most impressed with about Mars was the very fact that one of the first things it did was provide to companies who were working with Mars, startups working with Mars, a marketing research facility. Because knowing about your market, knowing what the competition is, seeing where you can position yourself in the marketplace right from the beginning. As I said, developing your market is also at the point in time that you create your product. You really understanding your market is very important. And the reason I said timing and ahead of the market is that that's one of the major challenges that many people face, which is that they do produce a product and they want to go out into the marketplace and the market isn't quite ready for it. And that's very often a point in time that they die. And you'll hear that, and I have heard it over the years. The product was absolutely fabulous, but the market wasn't quite ready for it. And it's a bit of a challenge, and there are at least one or two aspects of how that can be handled that I'll touch on later on. And oddly enough, it actually works against the argument of the large customer syndrome. The next item is a very challenging one, which is know how you intend to monetize. Everybody who's involved with anything on the internet at the moment is actually worrying about how they're going to monetize. Are they planning ahead correctly about monetization? And I had the pleasure of actually hearing a presentation from Chris Anderson from Wired the other day, and his view about how everything was moving to the point of being free is very challenging. He actually did say, and I asked him the question, what does the venture capital market understand about this whole issue of the fact that here I have a product, here I have a company, I'm setting it up, I'm developing a product, I need some money to help me get to develop my product, and by the way, the product's free and I don't quite know how I'm going to monetize it. And it's a real challenge at this moment in time because monetization is a serious item for discussion at this particular point in time. And there are a whole range of different ways that one can talk about, we could talk about how you can consider monetization. And the final point I want to touch on when it comes to product, and obviously this isn't a comprehensive discussion about product, is a launch is not an end in itself. I worked with a company a number of years ago, just to give you as an example, where it was introducing a new product and it was about to invest about $20 million in the introduction of that product into the marketplace, which is a reasonable amount of money. And I was asked by the president of the corporation at that point in time whether he felt that everything was going okay for the launch of the product. And I went along, discussed it with everybody, fabulous launch. It was in an absolutely sensational location, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I came back to him, and he repeated the question. I actually met both him and the chairman of the corporation at the time. The question was repeated to me, and the answer to the question was, is everything okay? The answer is no, everything is not okay. You've got the wrong objective. What was the objective that they were working to? They were working to spending $20 million on launching a product. That wasn't the objective. The objective was how to sell 25,000 of them in the next 3 months. As I said, creation is one thing, development is another. And so the money was all going on the launch. It was actually not going, as it should have been, split between the launch and the whole sales and marketing activity that was going to follow over the next 3 months, that was going to ensure that they sold 25,000 of them worldwide over that next period of time. So there are just a few thoughts and a few mistakes that I have to admit I've made over the years associated with product, and I've made them, unfortunately, several times. Have I got the right slide? Just, let me go backwards. Yeah, second one is people. Okay, people is the most important. There's no question about it. From the people who invest in you to the people that work around you, it is the thing that most people look to. It's one of those regular statements. People lend money to successful people. People who, if you could happen to get around you, guys who've already done it before and have already raised money, that's a great benefit when you're going to see somebody who's going to lend you money. They like to lend money to people who've already done it before. You can't always succeed in doing that. The next thing about those people, which I think is absolutely critical, is it can't always be your friends. You may love them, but that's not the important thing. You've got to respect them. They've all got to have real added value to the business. And it's one of those most challenging things that many startups have, which is that they get a group of people around them who are great buddies. But if they're not all adding real value to the business, then frankly, best to make sure that you just have the group that is adding value to the business right at the beginning. It's a tough decision, but it's possibly one of the most important ones. The next item is the shareholders agreement, and you'll have seen this in lots of documents, and I just want to concur with it. Hopefully your business is going to be incredibly successful. I've worked with people who've been very lucky to have actually had businesses which have gone on to be very successful. But one of the real challenges that occurs is that business, when you're creating that business, are the people in that business going to be great friends when the money starts pouring in? And the answer is, you never know. And a shareholders agreement up front is really an absolutely critical thing with people, with the guys who you work with every day. When money's at stake, things change. And so really, really important. And another aspect of that thing is make sure, and I've already sort of indicated it already, that the shares that you give out offer real value, that the people that you are having at the beginning are going to actually provide real ongoing value to the business, because other people coming later along are going to resent it if they aren't. They're going to see these guys, and it's going to cause all sorts of little challenges inside the organization. And final point I want to make about people is it's not just great developers that you're looking for. It's not just creative people on the product. You absolutely need great marketing people, and you absolutely need fabulous people on finance as well. If you can't get those people around you in your group, it's going to be a challenge to you going forward, because, particularly if you want to raise money as well, because people are going to look at that team and say, who's the guy who's going to really sell and market this product? Who's the guy who's going to drive that? Who's the guy that's going to look after the cash? And so talking about cash, it is king, of course, but you've got to be able to preserve that cash. I talked a little bit before about that challenge that you have if you're ahead of a market. And I heard an extremely interesting presentation a few months ago, which I totally concur with and have seen over the years. sometimes you are ahead of the market. And how the hell are you going to survive in that situation when the market hasn't quite got to the point that it's starting to buy your product? And one of the ways that you can achieve it is by doing exactly the opposite of what I said before, finding a large customer. You may have to do some product development specifically for them at that point in time. But if they're going to pay you money during that period when you aren't able to earn money out of the marketplace in general, it really is extremely valuable to be able to find somebody of that nature. And so it's worthwhile actually looking for that very large customer. Because in fact, and interestingly enough, if you can do it, and if you can do it without having to go to VCs and without having to go to the people who are going to provide you with cash from another source, in other words, their source, you're going to find that you actually will own most of, if not all, of your company. Because the next couple of lines are really important. Firstly, it's obvious that you have to network. Everybody uses the word network, network, network like mad. We've just had a MESH conference. I'm sure everybody spent their time networking like mad. And it really is worth doing. You network, the guys who are great at networking, the guys who can actually find those other people, who can both sometimes have the money, sometimes advise about the money, they are worth their weight in gold. They may not be contributing to the product, they may not be contributing in other sorts of ways, but they are amongst the most important people you can have around you. Because as I said before, if you go out to the VC, one thing that becomes very, very important is it's no longer your business. They not only own a chunk of your business, but they expect to actually make a lot of the decisions associated with the direction that the business takes. And they make no bones about it. They'll tell you that up front. You may not hear it, but they'll tell you that up front. I put up a little slide at the beginning about a number of companies that I've worked with. There's one company that isn't, there's one company that I can think of which isn't on that list. And I specifically today went onto the net and actually looked to see where were they today, and why, and was I right in not getting involved with the company? And the answer is that I saw that they are still asking for money. And the reason that they're asking for money is because the owner of that business will not give up the fact or recognize the fact that if they get money, they don't own the business anymore. They own a part of it, but they don't own the business. And that business will, in fact, never survive. So it's something to think about. If you can get your business off the ground, and in fact, Chris Anderson's view about life in the future was it's cheap to get a company started, do it yourself these days. It's better than going to VCs. And I would agree with that to a certain extent, except that he may well be in a position to get the marketing recognition that is necessary. But for many of you, marketing expense is a serious expense, and we come down to that a little later on. We talked about having a plan, and I think you seem to have a competition going on about plans, and you probably know more about producing business plans than I do, although I've had the advantage or disadvantage of reading many, writing many, reading many, and rejecting lots of them. And I have lots of points about it, but the only thing that I would, I'm not going to go through all of these points because I don't think it's worthwhile. You probably know a great deal about it, but a couple of points worth bringing out is do try and capture attention immediately. These guys look at so much, so they see them all the time. If you don't capture their attention, it'll be in the dustbin. It's going to be wrong. I mean, who knows what percentage of the market share you're actually going to get in year 3. It's going to be wrong, but it's a fact of life. You need to have it. You need to be able to demonstrate the numbers, because going right down, and I'm not going to actually go through all the detail here, everything does cost at least twice as much, and revenue is always half as much as you ever planned. And VCs recognize that. Not only do they recognize it, they also know that it's going to give them a greater percentage of your business. So it's important, therefore, from your point of view, to take that into account when you're actually producing the plan. Cash is king. And by the way, one final point, marketing does cost real money. So many people in their plans just put a fraction of what it really costs to market a product successfully. This is all about creating a product, and I just want to say a few words about development before I finish. The first word is obvious. You've got to spend all your time selling. And yet, do you know what? I've been to so many companies that have developed a product and they're not selling. They're incredibly busy. Their time is taken up with all sorts of things, but they haven't recognized that effectively from day one, selling is the most important thing. And the customer is king. That is obviously and absolutely vital. But it does include your staff. Your staff are your customers as well. And so many people forget that if they don't keep their customer, namely their staff, happy, they haven't got a company. Obvious things as well. Listen to your customers. It really, really is important. The number of times people have told me that they've gone to customers, they've heard what they've said, and yet they haven't. The next thing, which I think is really, really critical, is this issue about responding. I am an absolute believer in the sundown call. I was beaten to death by a gentleman called Michael Dell about it about 15 years ago, and he is absolutely right. If you have so many emails that you're receiving a day that you can't respond to people, at least as the emails come in, and tell them that you are going to respond and approximately when, or ideally respond immediately, then you've probably got something wrong in your organization. Just leaving people hanging out there is not going to create too much customer satisfaction. And can I say something else about customers? When you've got a problem, go to them. Customers want you to succeed. You know, when somebody buys something from you, they've stuck their career against your name. They bought your product. They have their reputation inside the organization depends upon the success of your product inside their organization. So if you have a problem, it's absolutely vital not to just sort of closet it to yourself and worry about it yourself. It's vital to actually involve the customer in it. Too many people are scared about talking to their customer when there's a problem, and yet they're the person who absolutely needs you to have a conversation with you about it and to work out the solution to them. The customer wants you to succeed. I have a perfect example that I can give of possibly one of the largest corporations in Canada that we were selling to in my days with Dell, in fact. The customer worked out the solution with us. If we hadn't, we wouldn't continue to do business with them. And so it's absolutely vital that you work with your customer. And talking about customers and the customer experience, I've just put that little ratio, 18:1. I bet you today it's about 180:1. But if you make a mistake, if you do something that's not too good with a customer, there was a statistic that people worked out that within absolutely no time at all, for every mistake that you make with a customer, 18 other customers will know about it. Within no time at all. And yet to build customer satisfaction is a really, really tough exercise. So it's absolutely, again, it's really important to recognize how important customer satisfaction is. And the companies that I have seen that have been really successful are those people who, people talk about customer, I think every single organization sticks out some message about customer satisfaction. But so few people really do it. And doing it is absolutely critical. And having an organization that's set up to do it, even if you lose money on that particular deal, it's absolutely vital to do it. I've mentioned Dell a couple of times. I'll mention them again. There was a point in time with Dell when customer satisfaction was absolutely paramount. And I have some, again, if anybody's ever interested, I have some wonderful little anecdotal stories about it and about the importance of it. And finally, today is all about the customer, about creating communities of customers. Because not only can you sell well with your customer, but your community of customers can sell well for you as well. So creating communities and community marketing nowadays is possibly one of the most important things that people can be thinking of and doing within their organization if they want to develop it. The next point is really, really critical. The impossible is possible. You've got to be able to have a culture in your organization where you achieve the impossible. I want to try and see if I can give you one or two examples that I can remember. There was one company that I worked with which was growing particularly fast, and it decided that it was recruiting people so rapidly that effectively it was taking on new staff every week. And it set itself a target, which was really straightforward target in terms of words, which was people had to be effective in selling their product. The main area it was taking on people was on sales. And it was a long time ago, so it was before you had any sort of thing called viral marketing. People had to be successful in selling their product within 3.5 hours of arriving in the company. Sounds an obvious, very simple thing to do. All you have to do is provide them with a desk, give them a computer, get it set up in your infrastructure, have it operating completely with all the product files there, train them in the products, train them in how to respond to all the queries that people raise, and you're in business. And all you have to do it is in 3.5 hours. They set themselves as that as an objective. They achieved it, and as I mentioned to you before, they started growing at 15% per month. You can only achieve the impossible if you really set out and plan to do it. And another example that I can think of that I personally was involved with was a number of years ago in a particular company. We had a request from a it was a customer who phoned up on Christmas Eve and said their daughter had forgiven everything for that particular Christmas. The only thing they wanted was a computer, and so they had specifically spent all their money for Christmas presents that year on buying them a computer, except that we hadn't delivered it. And so now they were without the one present that they had promised their child for next year. And that person was reasonably furious about it and wanted us to do something about it. So where do we find this product? Here we are in Toronto, they're out there in Edmonton. We don't know where the hell the product is, etc., etc. And what we essentially did, and by the way, it was 12 o'clock and everybody had gone home, apart from the factory manager and myself. And all that we did was make a new product, get FedEx to take it on priority, fly it to Edmonton, and deliver it directly to the client that afternoon. I managed to get my face in the Edmonton something or other, whatever the major newspaper in Edmonton that is, for being Father Christmas. But the crucial thing about it was, of course, we lost a fortune on the deal. But I can tell you, that guy was, not only was he the happiest guy, but I'm sure he was our biggest salesperson in Edmonton forever. So the impossible is possible. Guard your cash, an obvious statement. You know, everybody has to guard their cash. If you've got the right guy in that business, that guy I was telling you about, that finance guy that you all hate, but really he's the most valuable thing you've got around, it's absolutely critical. And finally, or the final points here, really that I want to make is businesses really don't do enough to set targets and metricize themselves. Every single business everything that you do needs to be metricized. You need to know what everybody is doing all the time, and you need it in some sort of a number. And if you don't plan to have it in some sort of a number, you won't know what's going on in your business. And if your business is moving really fast, and let's hope that you're all going to be really successful and your businesses are going to move really fast, if you don't know what the numbers are, you're not in control of your business. And so an absolutely essential thing to think about, and I can think of it from business to business to business, if you don't metricize, you've had it from the word go, because things will crawl up and beat you which you would never even can think about. But if you metricize, you can see them in advance. And so the final thing, which I find that most small and startup businesses don't do, I've been very bad with over the years, I think I'm getting a little bit better, is manage your time. People are so it reminds me, many businesses remind me of a group of kids, 5-year-old kids, pardon me, playing soccer. Somebody kicks the ball. All the kids run after the ball. Somebody else kicks the ball somewhere else, all the kids run after the ball. They're not managing their time. It's absolutely essential in a business that everybody has a role to play, everybody knows what they're doing with their time, and they manage it efficiently. If I manage my time efficiently, I think I finished. Thank you very much indeed.
Harvey, on behalf of the class here today, I know you have an extremely busy schedule, so we just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for sharing your experiences. Thank you for sharing some of your inspiring stories. So once again, just want to take this opportunity to say thank you. And Harvey has graciously offered to take any questions. There's a couple of microphones here. If anyone wanted to ask any questions, more than happy to do so.
Hello, thanks for speaking. Could you elaborate a little bit more about your experience at Dell, about the sundown clause, about the handling the flow of email?
Very, very simply, the rule very simply is this, that if somebody makes contact with you, particularly a customer makes contact with you, it's absolutely essential to acknowledge that customer before you go home that evening. And if you're not going to be able to answer their query, which more often than not you're not, give them an indication of when you are. Creating the right expectation in the customer's mind is absolutely essential. It could well be that you may have to say to them, do you know it's going to be another month before I can give you the full answer to that question? But then you're not going to have them phone you every day asking for the answer to the question. They may complain initially, you may have to explain to them why. So the sundown response is absolutely critical. Don and I were talking about it before, and in fact, there are various major consultancies who absolutely insist that every single employee does it, and I think it's essential. The number of people that I, for example, even today, send emails to and don't get any sort of response for days is enormous. Now, what do I think of that organization? You know, the guy may say, I'm very busy. Well, busy with somebody else? You know, I'm not that important to respond to. You actually create the wrong image for your organization if you don't at least say, I've got your message, I'm going to respond, and some indication of when you're going to respond. If you can answer it that day, even better. But we know people are busy. We know also some of the answers are difficult to achieve. But at least try to do so.
Any other questions? If you could just jump to the microphone, it would be great, so we can hear you throughout the auditorium.
Hi.
I'm just wondering, for many of the startups that you did create, how did you get someone the actual knowledge power to create the momentum for that startup?
You mean
someone who can actually perform and create the product or fulfill the...
Do you mean get the developers for the products? Or most of the startups that I was involved with had people with a dream, essentially, and they sold it to people around them. In other words, you have to be passionate about what you are creating and developing, and you'll be surprised how you can create excitement and interest around you. And so and I'm just trying to think my way through company after company, and that's what happened. People became passionate about what you were doing, and they joined in your passion. And essentially, everybody spends all their time, if they did but realizing it, selling it. You know, I've actually worked with people, mentoring them in trying to find new careers. And one of the things that I've often said to people in creating a new career is it's a sales job. The nice thing about it, if you're creating a career or you're trying to find a new job, is it's a sales job where you know the product perfectly and you only have to sell it once. And this is true about a new product. If you've got an idea for a product that you absolutely believe is going to be a winner, you should develop the passion and the ability to sell it, and you will find that the people that you need to get around you will come around you. The point I made before was sometimes you'll just do it to friends, and you've got to make sure that in selling it to them, having them come around you, that they add real value to it. Because it's so easy to become impassioned, bring people in, and then suddenly realize afterwards, well, they weren't actually adding any real value to what I'm doing. You have to be a little bit ruthless about that, I'm afraid. But you've got to have that passion and then the ruthlessness to make sure that the team that you create is going to be the team that takes it forward.
questions? Okay. Oh, one more.
It's a quickie follow-up, perhaps. So you want to have passion, you want to sell others in your team on the dream, and at the same time, you want to do a lot of questioning whether you're doing the right things over and over and over again. And how do you balance the two of
Okay,
those?
well, it's a good question, but before you get to the point of doing many of the things that I've talked about up there, which are related to making sure that you remember, the presentation is about, or my presentation was intending to be how to create and develop a successful company. Before you even get to that stage, you've got to have some passion in your product. Think of an idea and have great passion about it. Once you've got to that point, and you're thinking of actually making it into a real company, then you've got to start asking the questions. Because people come up with, set some people away in a room, get them to think about some great ideas, brainstorm, and they'll come up with a whole set of wonderful ideas. Now take each of those ideas and think your way through them and say, you know, is this really a product? Is this really going to change the world? And you're going to suddenly find that those ideas disappear very rapidly. So the answer is, in a sense, the first exercise is the desire to have something and being passionate about it. The second exercise is to actually establish that it's for real. One's being up there, and the other's being down here, feet firm on the ground.
Any more questions? Okay, well, once again, on behalf of the group here tonight, Harvey, we'd like to thank you for taking some time to come out and join us.
Thank you. Thank you.